Well, I guess it's now or never. All right, let's get things started in Scotland. As you know, on Soccer Down here, we're covering a bunch of different teams this year. I think John is going to be handling a team in England. I know Nick is going to be handling AC Milan because he likes to suffer, not unlike I do. I suffer in a different way, though. At least Nick knows what European glory is in his lifetime. Celtic, however, has provided me only with domestic glory. 9 championships in a row, going for 10 in a row this year. But at what cost? We're all going to find out together. So this is the first of the Celtic weekly reviews for Soccer Down here. Now, to catch you up on how everything has gone for Celtic, has it gone great? Not great, Bob. Not great. Celtic is at risk of losing a number of players because players may or may not want out after Celtic fell out in the qualifying rounds just to get to the playoff rounds to get into the group stages for Champions League, falling to the champions of Hungary. Now, one of the things to know about all of this is Celtic's manager is Neil Lennon. Neil Lennon played for Celtic in the past and was the guy in charge, almost a decade ago now, when the fabled team that beat Barcelona, they took Barcelona up into about 5 minutes before the end of the game, almost pulled a draw in Barcelona that year, and then proceeded to beat Barcelona 2-1 at home on a header from Victor Wanyama and a goal from an 18-year-old Tony Watt, who has gone on, I think, to play at Hibernian now. It just never really worked for him after that moment of glory. But he leaves eventually. Then you bring in Ronnie Deila, who tries to change things up a bit. It starts getting the best out of some guys, like a young Virgil van Dijk, like slims Virgil van Dijk down and gets more muscle on him and helps build the machine that you know today. In fact, at one point, you have Virgil van Dijk, Derek Boyata in that back line. You had Victor Wanyama. You had Charlie Mulgrew. You had Joe Ledley. You had a lot of actually really good players go through Celtic at that time. Gary Hooper really should have been better than he was when he gets out of Glasgow as a striker. Teemu Pukki spent some time in Glasgow as well during that time. But he ends up leaving. Brendan Rodgers comes in, does the invincible season. I'm going to stop you right there if you have any issues with calling it an invincible season just because it's Scotland. No. Any league you go an entire season without losing a domestic game is an absurd accomplishment, and Celtic accomplished that. Brendan Rodgers leaves in the middle of the night to go to Leicester, and then Neil Lennon comes back in as the caretaker manager and proceeds to get Celtic across the line 2 years ago. Last year, more of the same, although a little more up and down, and then now you have this year. And what you ran into this year so far is a new adventure in the world of Neil Lennon's tactics. Neil Lennon goes into a Champions League qualifier, which are now one leg because of the way things have changed. So Celtic goes into this qualifier without a striker up top. Odsonne Edouard is Celtic's star man striker. He is going to go for a lot of money, probably sooner rather than later. The Frenchman came from PSG for a hefty fee. He's going to leave Celtic for a very hefty fee as well. Now, I don't know how big that fee is going to be. It's not going to be as big as Celtic wants because somebody was inhaling helium in Glasgow when they made the deal from PSG, because the sell-on fee for PSG is something like 30 or 40%. I believe it's an obscene number that Celtic really should never agree to. But Odsonne Edouard has that key element you like in a really great striker, where it's the game slows down for him. He kind of gets that bullet time effect in the big moment. Everything slows down, and he just kind of places the ball wherever he wants in the back of the net. Absolutely fantastic striker. He was not available. You have a Yeti who just came from England. You also have Patrick Klimala, who just came from Poland, who hasn't really fit the bill, but sounds like he completely transformed his body over the summer to try and survive Scotland's very physical style of play. Be that as it may, you just brought in, 2 strikers, and you don't play either one of them. You play a false 9, and it really doesn't go well. The one goal you have is kind of a deflected shot that goes in, and then you give up 2 really cheap goals on the back end. So not great right now for Celtic. We're in the middle of the international break, which is kind of why we're starting this right now. Things have slowed down a bit. It's easy to recap that early in the season you saw if you watch Scotland, and I advise you to, if you just want to get a wild hair, especially with ESPN Plus picking up the rights to SPFL. it's a really interesting league, especially when you can separate out the old firm of Celtic and Rangers. You get to these other teams, you get some actually talented players that will get out there and play. You've got a couple managers who can have some fun with it. Even teams like Livingston will play a more defensive style. They'll get out on the counter and they'll make some very fun moments happen. But it's not going to be a top flight league, and it's just the way it is. The money certainly is not there. And right now the talent isn't there either. You can look at Scotland as a whole and kind of piece that one together without too much trouble. So the Celtic, a lot of times, if you're listening to this, I'm assuming you are familiar with Atlanta United. This is soccer down here, after all. We have harped, and people have harped for a long time about Atlanta needs to be better about breaking down bunkering teams. Well, that's basically Celtic's life in a nutshell, day in and day out. They spend their time trying to break down teams. A lot of teams, even on the road, even when Celtic goes on the road, you go to Motherwell, they're going to sit. You go to Livingston, they're especially going to sit deep, and you end up having to try and break them down and avoid getting hit on the counter. You're going to run into that a lot, and it's going to lead to some frustrating results. It also is going to lead to some results that you're like, my God, was another team even on the field where Celtic will drop 4 or 5 goals because they'll score early, break someone's spirit, and then they'll just keep hammering them home, because the wage bill at Celtic compared to other clubs in Scotland is absolutely obscene. The ratio on the wages is it's almost comical. But aside from that, let's see how things are going right now. I mean, You had Celtic miss 2 games because Boli Bolingoli, who is a left back for the club, went to Spain, broke COVID protocol, then came back and tried to play did play in a game where they had a very listless draw. So they had 2 games where they basically had to go into quarantine, not unlike Aberdeen did, just players being dumb. Now, the problem with all this Champions League nonsense that I talked about a minute ago with Celtic is that now you have guys who might want out. Olsen Edward might want out, and you can't really blame him at this point. Christoph Ayer has apparently asked for valuations. Norwegian center back is 6'5", runs like a deer, can play right back in a pinch, very quick, better with the ball at his feet than I think he's been in the past. Olivier Nsham, who was the hero in Roma last year where Celtic goes and beats Lazio, he's asked for valuation as well. You're going to start running into this with Callum McGregor as well. Wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Christie starts asking for values. These guys are seeing that there's a chance to go on, which is what you want to do. I mean, if you want to trace like a Scottish path, it is, I'm going to start at a smaller club. I'm going to play well. I'm going to go sign with Celtic. Hello there, Stuart Armstrong. And then I'm going to parlay that into going south into England. Gary Mackay-Steven is another one, even though he's over in New York City with Ronnie Dyla now. You start out at that smaller club. David Turnbull, who just recently signed for Celtic as a number 10, is in that similar vein where you want to play well for somebody, make that move. And if you don't make the move directly south or to another country, then you can jump to one of the old firm clubs and then try and make the move. So as it stands right now, you could have some Celtic players wanting out. And now the question becomes for Celtic is, at what cost do you chase 10 in a row? Now, 9 in a row is the fabled number. Celtic have won 9 titles in a row. They've done it before. They would have won 9 in a row. And Rangers have won 9 in a row in the past as well. Both times in the past at 9 in a row, the wall gets thrown up and it stops right there. Because of Celtic being right at the edge of 10 in a row, there's going to be this feeling, I think, and this temptation to just go for 10 in a row at all costs. And that is, one of those things where it's you break out the Thanos meme for this of, I got 10 in a row. What did it cost? Possibly everything. It could cost you a lot. Now, you're not necessarily going to go under financially because Celtic still is responsible enough financially with things, especially you sell guys like Kieran Tierney last year to Arsenal. Allegedly, Leicester City wants at least one of your players. Brendan Rodgers does what managers do. They know a guy who's familiar with them, who fits what they want to do. They think he can play at that level. They're going to chase him, whether that be a guy like Callum McGregor who can play in that holding midfielder role and kind of plays that deep lying playmaker. Celtic's about to have to make some really difficult decisions this year. Scott Brown's been the captain for a long time, former Scottish Player of the Year, has played for Scotland's national teams, captain the national team, is absolutely about that life in terms of the physicality kind of guy who's going to get red card tackled and get up and laugh and dance afterward. Not nearly as many red cards on his ledger as you might expect, but a bit of a nasty streak. But those legs are going at 35, 34, 36 years old, somewhere around there, his mid-30s. Everything's starting to go on him just a little bit, and it's just enough where you're starting to wonder, what's the backup plan here? You've brought in Soro from Israel to kind of be that next guy, perhaps, but I think you're seeing that Scott Brown doesn't have it in him all the time. He can give it to you sometimes, but it's the legs just aren't there, and the agility's just not there like it used to be. He used to be able to play as an 8 when he was younger, then he switched back to that 6, and now you're getting to the point where he's not able to do even that at the high levels anymore. And it's not a shot at him directly. It's just a guy who's getting older, who's got a lot of tread being torn off those tires over the year. He's going to be a guy who gets a testimonial match at some point, and is going to end up in whatever sort of, however you want to memorialize a guy. He's the kind of guy you do it for. If you're Celtic, he's been there long enough. He's captained some teams, and he's been really kind of ingrained in it for a long time. How do you fix that going forward? How do you, factor in a Yeti coming into this team with Klimala trying to figure himself out? They've been tied to a couple Americans as well. We'll keep an eye on that as things progress. Brennan Aronson's been allegedly linked there. You had Emilio Izaguirre, who played at Celtic for a long time as a left back. The Honduran has tried, apparently, to start conversations with Albert Ellis about going to Glasgow. And Houston's kind of in a situation where they need to either to go or get off the pot, so to speak, with Ellis, because his contract is going to run out, and you don't want to lose him straight up on a free. Physicality-wise, he'd be fine at Scotland. I'd love to see him come play. But on the right side over there, you've got a getting older version of James Forrest, who came up through Celtic's academy and means a lot there. So we'll keep an eye on transfer rumors as they develop for Celtic. We'll keep an eye on the league as they get back into it. Right now, Rangers on top of the table, but they have 2 games in hand. If Celtic win their games in hand, then they'll be tied with Rangers at the top of the table. It's just where it sits early on. A lot of this season is probably going to come down to those old firm matchups between Celtic and Rangers, and it felt like they were last year. Go right up until Christmas time, where Rangers just runs roughshod over Celtic in an embarrassing fashion. And they were in really good shape, and then Steven Gerrard just that team falls apart in early 2020. January, February, early March, just cannot get results. They love to sit a little deeper and play on the counter, and it doesn't work when you're playing teams that like to sit back and are more than happy to say, here, you can have the ball, because if you're not Celtic or Rangers in Scotland, that's probably how you're going to play. So it will be an interesting season to see how that shakes out over with the Rangers. We'll keep an eye on that. And this isn't going to be like a Rangers bashing thing, I promise. It might be a shot here or two across the bow. But I really do want to see how Steven Gerrard performs as a manager going forward, because I think we saw him hit kind of a roadblock last year with that team. There is talent. Allegedly, Alfredo Morelos, the Colombian striker, in the insane Buffalo that he is, who is very talented, maybe on the way out, and they're trying to figure out their striker situation. But if you talk about one, you have to talk about the other. These two clubs are tied together, so there will be some Rangers discussion, but it won't be just straight up slander of Rangers in name only and just for the hell of it. But it's mostly going to center on the side where Celtic sits right now, and to see how this transfer situation shakes out. They get back to play this weekend with league play, and they got Europa League qualifiers coming up as well. Next season is when it gets really interesting for Scotland, because of the work that Celtic and especially Rangers did last year in Europa League. The coefficient for Scotland is as high as it's been in a very long time. So you're going to have multiple shots at Champions League and Europa League and all that sweet money that comes in. Celtic has already blown their shot for Champions League this year with the horrible performance against the Hungarian champions. So that's the quick update. That's what we're going to be, and we'll give you an update at least once a week, if not more. It just depends on what kind of news breaks. If we get breaking news, if we get some dumb stuff, especially during the silly season in transfers, we're going to pay attention to it and see what's going on. But that'll do it for now. I'm Jarrett Smith. This will be signing off right now, talking about Celtic.